Shana Tova, friends. Let's begin this Rosh Hashanah with a game of Jewish bingo. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Let's begin by lowering our hand if you've ever been to a concert, maybe in the last year, where suddenly the performer launches into a tirade against Israel or in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable. That one happened to Rosh Rachel and her daughter. How about lower your hand if a teacher or a coach or a professional pushed a narrative about Israel that forced you or your child to speak up? That happened to some of the parents in our religious school. How about lower your hand if your family had to choose between a Jewish observance or being included? Like last year when Passover and prom coincided, or when universities held classes on the high holidays, like Westchester University. Okay, lower your hand if in the last year or two, someone has asked you as their Jewish friend to explain what's going on in the Middle East. That one happened to me. Just a few months ago out of the blue, an old summer camp counselor wrote, "Hi Sam, I know Israel is not acting as a country, it's Netanyahu, but profession aside or included, what is your verdict?" Friends, 2 years ago, on Yom Kippur, I spoke about the burden placed on us diaspora Jews. Just by being Jewish, we carry the weight of the projections of the world, whether it's about Israel, or the Holocaust, or DEI debates, or interfaith politics. We become, willingly or not, the Jewish piece in society's diversity puzzle. Sometimes this means hiding or tokenizing our identity. Sometimes it means being squeezed into narratives that misrepresent our lives and our history. And while we wrestle with this daily as individuals, today, on Rosh Hashanah, we come together and wrestle with it together as a community. Let me give you an example. Imagine your child has to read the diary of Anne Frank in school. Now imagine that Anne Frank is actually a Syrian refugee, or a Palestinian. Or imagine Anne Frank isn't persecuted because she has white privilege. Now imagine Anne Frank is Slam Frank, a pansexual Latinx child rapping with her abuela in Brooklyn. These are all real debates over Anne Frank's legacy in the last few years, and there is a likelihood when your child reads her diary in public school, these revisions may be brought up. I look around and see all of you today and ask you the same thing that you asked me. What are we going to do with this energy? One of our teenagers wrote to me this year about a project they were working on. They said, "I wanted to record Jewish books on my YouTube channel, but I was told it wasn't a good idea. So instead, I'll focus on books with values like caring for the planet, values I love because of Judaism, but I won't call them Jewish." And that broke my heart. Even our teenagers, who should feel free to share their Jewish pride, feel the pressure to hide who they are. Another congregant said it to me more bluntly. "Rabbi, I get that we're Jewish, but Israel's not making it any easier for us in America." These voices, your voices, are the reality of our moment. An Atlantic article titled "The Golden Age of American Jews is Ending" put it plainly. Anti-Semitism is a mental habit, a tendency to fixate on Jews, to overstate our role and cast us as villains. The right may accuse us of conspiracies, the left may tokenize or exclude us in the name of justice. Different directions, the same projection. And into that swirl came another question, forwarded to me by strangers, congregants, and even my own mother, written by Ezra Klein in the New York Times. For decades, American Jews built on liberalism. For decades, American Judaism, built on liberalism of the diaspora, has been interwoven with Zionism. What happens when the ideals of the one become incompatible with the reality of the other? I'll repeat that. For decades, American Judaism, built on the liberalism of the diaspora, has been interwoven with Zionism. But what happens when the ideals of the one become incompatible with the reality of the other? And I want to answer it by saying, he still gets it wrong. The New York Times still gets it wrong. The question is not what American Jews will do with a non-liberal Israel. The question is what liberal Americans will do with Judaism as our world enters a non-liberal order. As Yale professor Walter Russell Mead reminds us in his book, The Ark of the Covenant, the driving forces behind America's fascination with Israel originate outside of the American Jewish community. They are more about conflicts over American identity, the direction of world politics, and the place that the United States should aspire to occupy in the world history than more about anything happening on the ground. In other words, Israel and the Jews are a distorted mirror for the anxieties of our age. We are the address that half-baked conspiracies are mailed to, and that, in my opinion, is what being chosen means. So what do we do with this? I promised my friend Joe I would give him my verdict on the Middle East, Israel and Palestine. The truth is, there is no neat solution. As geopolitic analyst and philosopher Hussein Abu Bakr Mansour writes, the conflict endures because irresolution is its function. It is embedded within multiple overlapping systems of power, geopolitical, economic, and symbolic, whose reproduction depends on the maintenance of the status quo. The question of who is right or who is wrong is narrow. It's structurally misleading. Power is real. Power matters. Steel matters. Money matters. Code, logistics, labor, leverage. These are not vulgarities. They are the material world that we inhabit. They are what decides the fates of people. They what ought to discipline our thinking. Friends, the veneer is off, and we have indeed entered a world of realpolitik. Our exposure to this pressure requires a countermeasure. It requires a level of intelligence and wisdom and pragmatism and, yes, faith. Faith that we will make it all out all right, because we will. What matters most is not geopolitics, but how we here endure. For us to survive and to flourish, we need to build a kind of spiritual bunker, not to hide from the world, but to withstand its storms. And that means three things. One, build a social web, a web of belonging. Here, in this community, you do not need to hide who you are. You are loved and accepted and nourished. At KI, be true to yourself. You are respected. And two, build an intellectual framework. Find the news sources and thinkers that you trust. Don't let the crowd or the algorithm dictate what you believe. The mainstream is not always right. The mainstream doesn't represent us. Find the thought leaders and information scouts who do. And three, lastly, develop a prayer practice. The ancient scapegoating ritual was transformed by the rabbis into collective prayer. It was a way to discharge the negativity that the world projected on us even back then. Prayer remains our way of transforming pain into resilience and projection into transcendence. Here I turn to reporter, Middle Eastern critic Douglas Murray, who strengthens us and provides a warning, a cautionary tale of what's out there. He writes, "Perhaps our age doesn't like the idea of evil, or doesn't know what to make of it. And yet, if there is one thing that we ought to be able to do, it's to identify true evil, the profundity of evil, when we see it. What can Western liberal societies do in the face of such movements? What can people do? What can people who choose to value life do in the face of those who worship death? We can choose life. Choosing life is one of the most important commandments of the Jewish faith. It is also one of the most fundamental values of the West. They and all of us can win in spite of an enemy loving death, because there is nothing wrong with loving life so much. It is the basis on which civilization can win." That's not just political advice, my friends. That is spiritual advice. And to choose life is indeed our calling. That's what we do every Rosh Hashanah. When I meet with parents and family and congregants in my office, I feel this fierce desire to protect you, to shield you from the storm outside. But I'm not naive, and protection alone is not enough. Rosh Hashanah is not a holiday of retreat. It's a holiday of renewal. Each year we gather to proclaim the world can be remade anew, not by denying reality, but by meeting it head on with courage and wisdom, faith and life. My friends, we may be a small people, but we are not a powerless people. This year, let us all choose life by binding ourselves to one another, by grounding ourselves in trusted wisdom, by lifting our voices up in prayer. That is how we build a spiritual bunker strong enough to withstand the vicissitudes of history. And if this world continues to project its darkness upon us, let us answer that darkness with light. This is why we are chosen. This is why we are Or L'Goyim, a light to the nations. And this light begins right here in this room on this Rosh Hashanah and carries us, all of us, together into a new age, a new year of strength, of blessing and peace. Shana Tova U'Tikva Teva.